Knucklehead Smith, you stand here before the court, accused of crimes against the Crown. How do you plead?
Not guilty, Your Honor.
And how finds the court?
Well, Your Honor, we find the defendant
Guilty, he's guilty, he's guilty. We find the defendant guilty. G-U-I-L-T-Y. Guilty, guilty, guilty.
By unanimous decision, Knucklehead, you have been found guilty of your crimes, and the punishment for these crimes is beheading. May Paul Winchell have mercy on your soul.
Oh, sweet Winkle in heaven.
Any last words for the condemned?
If you say that I did it, then I did. But I didn't do it.
Sure. That's what they all say.
Oh, greetings, Internet. I didn't see you standing there. How long have you been there? Oh, well, you kind of caught me during one of my side jobs, with all this nonsense going on in the world, a creep like me's got to do a little something to make a little extra money, It's good exercise. I will admit, it's not the most optimal of jobs. Here, let's discuss this back in the Ox lair. Just gotta get out of this thing. It's a bit warm. Salutations, friendos, and welcome back to the Ox lair. Again, I'm sorry you all had to see that, but a ghoul's gotta eat, Anyways, if this happens to be the first of these videos that you've clicked on or has come up in your feed, then you may be asking yourself what it is that we're doing here today. To answer that question, I'll be taking a look back at the writings of R.L. Stine, the author of the Goosebumps series, among others, including Fear Street, The Nightmare Hour, and there's another one that's not coming to me. But regardless, we're going to be taking a look at his works in relation to Goosebumps. I will also be taking a look at the episodes based off of these books, but to be specific, I'm only going to be taking a look at the episodes that were released on VHS back in the day, and in the order in which they were released by Fox Home Entertainment. With that said, let's get a look at today's episode, which, if it wasn't already obvious from the title down below and the fact that I'm holding them in front of you, it is A Night in Terror Tower, which, according to my research, was the third of these episodes released in this format, again by Fox Home Entertainment. For starters, as we did with the last episode, we will be taking a look at the characters as they're described in the book versus their on-screen counterparts. First off, we have Sue Morgan. The only thing we learn about her in the book is that she has long brown hair. The Sue in the episode, here she is shown to have long brown hair and brown eyes, just like her book version. She seems to be a bit on the tall side as well, and fun fact, she is played by the same actress who played Sabrina Mason in both of the Haunted Mask episodes. Eddie Morgan, here in the book, is only described as having brown eyes and dark brown hair. the Eddie Morgan in the episode,
He's shown to be shorter than Sue, which makes sense since he's the younger sibling. He is also shown to have the brown hair and brown eyes of his book counterpart.
Mr. Starks, the tour guide at Terror Tower. The book only says that he is a bald man that has a red face. The Mr. Starks in the episode,
He's shown to have a full head of graying hair as well as bushy eyebrows. He seems to have blue and/or green eyes. Honestly, it's a little bit hard to tell.
in the book, Sue and her brother Eddie are visiting London with their parents. The reason for being there is that their parents were invited to attend a big meeting in town. This morning, the two kids were sent off from their hotel, the Berkeley, on a guided tour of all the sights of London. And things are going swell, and Sue and Eddie are enjoying themselves. But then, during the last stop on their tour, they get to visit the ancient Tower of Terror. At this point in the story is where things take a turn as Sue notices a big, darkly dressed figure begin following them in one of the torture chambers. No one else seems to notice him at first, not even Eddie. As the tour progresses, though, the group makes it to the top of the tower, to a little room which acted as a holding cell centuries ago for a princess named Susanna and a prince named Edward, who were smothered to death in their sleep. As the tour guide explains all of this, Sue starts to get more and more creeped out. She and Eddie go to leave with the group, only to find that they've all vanished. The two start making their way back down the long and winding stairwell when they run into the cloaked figure who had been following them through the torture exhibit before. He makes an attempt to catch them, but they manage to break away from him and flee down the stairs, where he almost catches up with them when they get stopped by a door at the bottom. The duo force it open just in time and manage to lock him into the stairwell behind them. They find themselves in yet another torture chamber, with the cloaked figure pounding on the door. Before they can figure out how to get out of this room, the cloaked figure manages to get through the door and starts coming after them again. By this point in the story, Sue happens to have found a flashlight, which she uses and finds a tunnel through which she and Eddie can make a daring dash and try to escape their pursuer. When he trips over one of the wax dummies that's changed to the floor, that are part of the torture exhibit, they make their getaway. This tunnel turns out to lead to a sewer, and the two follow the path down. Not long after this, they hear the thundering footsteps of the man in black. This time, when he catches up to them, he manages to get a hold of Eddie. But before he can get Sue as well, he gets thwarted by a swarm of rats, which Sue had accidentally riled up when she had shown a flashlight beam across them. Eddie manages to get loose of the figure, and he and Sue leap up and hang on to some brass beams in the ceiling as the rats chased the cloaked figure away. The duo find their way outside and bump into the old guard/groundskeeper for the castle, along with the terror tower therein. He's able to get them a taxi back to their hotel. When they get there, though, they start to realize that something isn't quite right when the cab driver doesn't accept their money, which he refers to as play money. Sue convinces him to let them out of the cab so that they can go and get their parents, who would then cover the cab fare. Smart thinking on her part. Things only get worse from there, though, as they wind up being unable to find their parents. Then at the front desk they make the startling realization that they can't remember their last names nor what their parents look like. The two have another run-in with the cloaked figure while trying to hide from the cabbie from before, who comes in looking for them and his money for the ride. The figure focuses in on Eddie, whom it turns out had stolen the 3 white stones the figure had pulled out earlier when he had cornered them in the stairwell at Terror Tower. He demands them back, but when Eddie gives them to him, he uses them to cast a spell, and suddenly the kids are thrust back in time to the 1500s. As Eddie and Sue are starting to piece this all together, however, Eddie disappears and Sue finds herself being pursued by the cloaked figure once more alone. Not long after this, she gets tricked by a woman whom she had paid to help her, and gets hauled away back to Terror Tower inside of a big basket that the woman had told her to hide in. At the tower, she gets reunited with Eddie again. We also find out the identity of their pursuer, the Lord High Executioner. Sue and Eddie's reunion is short-lived, however, as shortly after they're thrown into a cell together, a figure in purple robes enters the room and introduces himself, sadly, as being Morgred, the king's sorcerer, and begins to inform them about what's going on. As it turns out, Eddie and Sue are actually the prince and princess, Edward and Susanna, they had been learning about during the tour earlier. Morgred had wiped their memories and replaced them with new ones before sending them off to the future to try and help them escape their fate. They don't believe him at first, but then he restores the memories and things start to click. They ask him if he can perform the spell again, to which he sadly replies that without the 3 stones which are required for the spell to work, and that the executioner had stolen from him, it would be impossible. At this point, Eddie reveals that he pickpocketed the 3 stones from the executioner when he was grabbed back in the tunnel at the village. And he hands the stones over to Morgred. Even with the stones, however, the sorcerer refuses to cast the spell again, for fear of what the executioner could do to him. Edward and Susanna notice that Morgred had forgotten to close the door when he entered, and they go to make a run for it. But as they're running, Morgred casts a spell and freezes them in place, before sadly leaving and closing the door behind them. The spell wears off momentarily, and the two hear heavy footsteps outside coming up the stairs. We find out that Eddie had pickpocketed Morgred when he had hugged them apologetically while explaining to them the reason why he couldn't cast the spell again. The two use the stones, along with the spell which Morgred had let slip earlier, to escape back to the present. Only this time they've somehow managed to bring Morgred with them. They agree to take up the last name Morgan after Morgred agrees to be their surrogate parent, and soon after we find out from a different tour group, since they're all still in the tower, obviously, they jumped forward in time, not jumped to a different continent. Anyway, the different tour group that happens to enter the cell in which they were still standing, that on the night that the prince and princess was supposed to have been executed, they vanished mysteriously and were never seen again. Then as the tour group leaves, the now trio decides to go get some burgers, and the story comes to a close. Thrilling stuff, eh? Well, with the book story concluded, let's go over and pop this bad boy into the VCR and see what the episode was like. Alrighty, so the episode story goes like this. We start off with a scene of a prisoner being led away by a couple of guards while he's pleading with them not to torture him. This turns out to be a video being played on a TV at the Visitors Center before the tour that Eddie and Sue are about to go on to see Terror Tower. They go with the group and we find out that their parents are on a business trip and thus aren't with them. When they arrive at their destination, Eddie lingers behind and sees a man up on the wall surrounding the grounds, who is calling out to him and warning him to go back! Go back! Sue comes to check on him, and when Eddie looks back, the shackled man is gone. They then turn and run off to catch back up with the group. When they rejoin the group, the tour guide is telling the others about the history of the place. They make their way inside and head up to the tower itself. The tour guide gives them all a scare by pretending that he's about to send them all to the North Tower to be tortured.
Tortured? Did he say tortured?
After having a little laugh about that, the group begins heading off towards the torture chamber located further up the tower. Once there, they get to see the many wax figures being displayed in the torture devices. Sue decides to get a photo of Eddie in this room, and when he gets into position near an executioner figure, she thinks she sees it move, and this causes her to drop her camera. Eddie runs off annoyed, and the figure attacks, or so it would seem.
It turns out that the axe it was holding fell out of place and nearly hit her.
It moved.
Eddie races back when he heard her cry out. The tour guide comes back as well and winds up accusing her of messing with the display. Then the group moves on as Eddie confesses to having seen some things as well. They hurry to catch up with the group again. On their way, Eddie messes with another figure by pulling its hat down over its face and proclaiming, "They're only wax!"
Eddie.
As they continue on, the figure reaches up and fixes his hat before stepping away from the wall in their direction. Eddie and Sue catch up to the group as they're going up the stairs to the North Tower. The guide informs them of the fate of two particular former inmates of the tower, the young Prince and Princess of York, who were killed by the Grand High Executioner's men so that they would never reach the throne. After this, Eddie and Sue go into the cell, where they wind up seeing the same strange man Eddie had seen earlier, carving the words, "Long live freedom," into the wall. When he sees them, he calls out to them just before being dragged back into the shadows and vanishing. The two hurry to rejoin the group, only to find that they've disappeared. Not long after, the guy whom Eddie had messed up the hat of appears in the doorway. At first, they think he's part of the tour, but then he grabs Eddie while saying, "You will come with me, and you know why I am here." He cautions them not to try to escape, then starts chanting some strange words while stacking some white stones on the palm of his hand. They rush past him, and Eddie bumps into him, causing him to drop the stones. He chases after them, and they wind up in the dungeon exhibit again. Locking the door behind themselves on the way in, they manage to calm themselves down a bit, and Eddie realizes that the dungeon is only a display, just as the man gets through the door. He takes hold of Eddie after proclaiming that they know why he is here, and that they will come with him. Sue manages to strike him on the back with an arm off of one of the wax figures, allowing Eddie to get loose again, and the duo goes running off through a tunnel. The man gives chase again, calling after them that they cannot escape from him. He almost catches Eddie again when he and Sue are climbing up a ladder. He's only stopped by a random swarm of bats. Sue and Eddie escape, only for Sue to nearly get run over by the tour bus as she's poking her head up from the manhole cover in the middle of the road that the ladder had led up to. After that little scare, they manage to crawl out and up onto the street and are confronted by a security guard who demands to know what they were doing down there. They try to explain about how they'd been chased down there by someone, but the guard doesn't believe them, claiming to be the only one there and telling them that the tower has been closed for the day. He threatens to call the police on them for trespassing. They manage to get away from him, though, by hailing a taxi, which they take back to the hotel where they're staying with their parents. When they arrive and they attempt to pay the fare, the cabbie doesn't accept the coins Sue tries to give him, thinking that it's play money. They convince him to let them out of his cab by telling him that their parents will be able to pay him. Then they go into the hotel to find them. At this point, they realize that neither of them has the key to their room. They go to the front desk and ask the clerk about the conference that their parents are supposed to be attending in the hotel. He informs them that there isn't a conference going on in the hotel at this point in time, and suggests that they might be in their wrong hotel.
If the setup for this sounds familiar to anyone, it's probably due to the fact that a very similar story was written in the book Scary Stories 3, More Tales to Chill Your Bones. In this particular book, the tale goes under the title of Maybe You Will Remember, although the ending to that particular tale is far more bleak than the ending to this one. The more you know.
Anyways, they then ask for the key to their room, and the clerk informs them that there isn't anyone in that room. He then offers to look up their room using their last name. At this point, both Eddie and Sue realize that they can't seem to recall their last name, much to the annoyance of the clerk, and then they begin to freak out a bit, thinking that there must be something wrong with them.
Gee, you think so?
The clerk brushes them off and tells them to come back once they've figured out what their last names are. He then starts checking in another guest. At this time, they spot the taxi driver who had come in looking for them. They duck into the hotel's restaurant to hide from him. Once inside, Eddie is given a jacket because, Male guests are required to wear a jacket while dining here. Shortly after this, the duo is seated at a table and order some food while they try to figure out just what to do next. They puzzle over things, and Sue comes to the realization that she can't remember what either of their parents look like. Eddie reaches the same conclusion that he isn't able to either. Nor can either of them remember where they live, nor can they remember anything beyond that day, or their room number.
Hopefully their last name wasn't Gibbs. And hopefully their room number wasn't 505. Or this story is about to take a very dark turn very quickly.
The only other thing they can remember, aside from their first names, is that their parents were supposed to be at a conference in this hotel. Soon after, the cabbie spots them and they are forced to flee the restaurant. They make a break through the kitchen, where at this point, the man in black catches up to them again. He begins demanding that Eddie return something to him. We find out here that Eddie had swiped one of those white stones from him before when he was grabbed back at the tower. Eddie gives it back to him after demanding that he lets them go. He gives him the stone and the man says that they will be leaving. But instead of letting them go, he starts up that same chant from back at the tower while stacking the stones again. Then he and Eddie disappear with a flash, leaving Sue in a strange room only lit by torches. She begins looking for her missing brother and finds herself in a dining hall of sorts, where a feast seems to be going on. She steps outside, where she tries to ask a couple of kids where she is, and realizes that people are staring at her. She also realizes that everyone is dressed like they're at a Renaissance fair. She starts asking around about her brother. One woman tells her that it's too late for the boy, and that she can smell evil all around Sue, then proclaims that her time is coming. Soon after this, a group forms around her, pointing and saying, "She be the one!" They scatter when the cloaked man shows up again, this time on a horse.
Well, at least they're changing things up now.
He states that it's time to go now. She asks where Eddie is, and he tells her not to worry about him, before telling her again that it's time to come with him. She refuses and takes off in search of a place to hide. She asks a woman to hide her and offers to pay her. When the woman sees the coins, the same coins that the taxi driver thought were simple play money, she agrees to hide her and has Sue get into a big basket before covering her with the lid. Moments later, the man in black arrives, and the woman immediately gives her up. When Sue starts yelling at her, the woman apologizes for the deed and adds that she dare not go against the Lord High Executioner. Sue is then led away in chains to a nearby cart, where she gets paraded through the streets to Terror Tower. Once there, she gets taken up to the cell at the top, where she gets reunited with Eddie. As they're starting to catch up with each other, the man who had been chasing them, now known as the Lord High Executioner, silences them and commands his men to lock them away. They get taken to another cell, where they meet the strange man they had seen before. He addresses them as Edward and Susanna. He seems a bit confused when they don't remember him, then introduces himself as Morgred, and says that he is the king's sorcerer. He begins to tell them the story of what has happened, that he had tried to help them escape their fate at the hands of the Lord High Executioner.
Sorry if that's getting old for some of you, but I just think it's fun to say Lord High Executioner. I mean, go ahead, give it a shot yourself. I'll give you about 5 seconds to try it. See what I mean? No? Well, fine. I think it's fun to say anyways.
He had tried to help them escape their fate at the hands of the Lord High Executioner and his men by sending them far off into the future and altering their memories so that they could survive there. He admits that the memories weren't complete. This starts to make sense to Sue, and she starts asking about their parents. Morgan informs her, sadly, that their parents are dead, and that their uncle has named himself King. He goes on to explain that it was he, their uncle, who had ordered them to the tower to get them out of the way. When Eddie asks what's going to happen to them, they hear a door open and the Lord High Executioner's men start to make their way up to get them. They reach the cell and one reads off a scroll proclaiming that they have been ordered to be executed by beheading. The door to the cell is opened, and suddenly Ed and Sue are reverted back to being Edward and Susanna, Prince and Princess of York, the memories having fully been restored, and their clothing having changed to royal attire and everything. Randomly, Morgred's outfit has changed as well, and we find out from him that the reason behind this is that the spell he had cast has worn off.
And me.
So wait a minute. Now let me get this straight. You're telling me that the spell was just going to wear off this soon after they were sent away? So what? Edward and Susanna were going to be just a couple of children from the Middle Ages stuck in the 20th century? Or would it be that they would have been pulled back through time once the spell wore off? I guess it could also be that Morgred just wasn't able to cast the full spell before they were heaved into the future, which would explain their incomplete memories, but dang, Morgred really didn't think this one through, now did he?
He laments over the fact that he wasn't able to keep the promise he had made to their parents. They tell him that he did his best, and they commend him for his efforts. Then Susanna tells Edward that they should face the executioner's axe with dignity. They are then led away, along with Morgred, to the execution chamber. On their journey, Edward questions why Morgred can't just send them all back to the future again, and we find out that his powers are weak when he lacks the 3 white stones, which the Lord High Executioner had stolen from him. He also says that he had wanted to come with them to the future to make sure that they were safe, but the executioner sent himself instead to bring them back. He laments his failure again, and the trio reach the execution chamber, where Morgred makes one final plea for their lives, asking that he be allowed to send them back to the future again, and asking what harm could they do him there. The Lord High Executioner rebuts this by replying,
and
allow them to grow up and become strong, to find a way to return and take their revenge? I think not. He then commands his men to bring forth the condemned. As they're being brought forth, Eddie breaks away from Susanna and rushes up to the Lord High Executioner, where he begins begging and pleading to be spared.
I'm afraid, please.
Quiet dignity and grace.
This is, of course, a ploy for him to pickpocket the stones and get them back to Morgred, which he does, tossing them to the sorcerer, who immediately begins casting the spell to take them back to the future again. The executioner tries to have his guards put a stop to this, but Susanna sticks out her foot and causes them to trip and fall to the ground in a heap. The executioner himself rushes to try and stop him, just as he finishes the spell, and the trio start to dematerialize, with Edward proclaiming, "Long live freedom!" They reappear back in the present-day 90s, still in the dungeon, which is now only a display, and an employee of the Terror Tower, dressed as a guard, comes in and we see that Edward and Susanna are Eddie and Sue again, and are wearing their normal clothes once more. The tour guide from earlier comes in immediately after and exclaims that the group has been looking for them. Eddie and Sue excitedly exclaim that they've made it. When the tour guide starts to question them, Morgred makes his appearance known, and we get to see that he's also dressed in modern clothes. He claims to be their guardian and assures the guide that he'll make sure they don't get lost again. The tour guide tells them that the tower will be closing in 5 minutes, and mentions that they wouldn't want to get locked in now, would they? Morgred agrees, and then they leave with the tour group. When they are getting onto the bus to leave, Eddie asks the tour guide once more about what happened to the prince and princess. He tells them that nobody knows exactly. When the king came to the dungeon, the prince and princess were gone. He then adds, what happened to them remains a mystery to this very day. Then he and Sue hop aboard the bus. Morgred checks his pockets, and it's revealed that he's only got 2 of his 3 stones. He calls to Edward, thinking that he had swiped the missing stone. He climbs onto the bus and asks him about it, asking if he had been up to his tricks again. Edward denies this, saying, "Hey, don't look at me." As the bus pulls away, we get treated to a shot of the Lord High Executioner standing there, fiddling around with Morgred's missing stone in his hand. He then looks up from it and glares after the bus as it pulls away. This is where the episode ends. Alrighty, boils and ghouls, and everything in between. What did you think of this one? Personally, I like the book better, mainly for the ending. The ending of the episode was alright, but since to my knowledge Mr. Stein never wrote a sequel to this particular book, leaving it open like that with a sequel hook just feels unwarranted and seems tacked on. Like, they saw the ending of the book and they were like, how can we make this more suspenseful for the kiddies? I know, let's add a twist where the bad guy catches a ride to the future with him as well. I don't know about you all, but that just doesn't sit right with me. But what do I know? I don't write this stuff, I just review it. Anyways, everyone, thank you all so very much from the bottom of my cold little black heart for tuning in once again. It really means a lot that you would be willing to put up with me prattling on about wayward nostalgia each week. It truly does mean a lot to me. Now then, with all of that Halloween hubbub out of the way, this is Oxtoberfest saying, YouTube viewers beware, and subscribe if you dare. The duo then find their way outside and bump into the old guard/groundskeeper for the castle and the terror tower within. He's able to get them a cab. It's a taxi. They're able to get him he's able to get them a taxi, not a taxi, not a castle, a taxi. The duo then find their way outside and bump into the old guard. The duo then find their way outside and wind up bumping into the old guard/groundskeeper for the castle, along with the terror tower within. He's unable. Up there. Smart thinking on her part. Things only get worse from there, though, as they wind up being able. Things only get worse from there, though, as they wind up being unable to find their parents. The figure focuses in on Eddie, whom it turns out had stolen the 3 white stones the figure had pulled out earlier when he had cornered them in the stairwell at Terror Tower. In the stairwell at Terror Tower. Come on. I'm working to be a professional YouTuber, goddammit. I just need practice, that's all. Practice. Practice makes perfect. He demands them back, but when Eddie gives them to him, the figure uses them to cast a spell, and suddenly the kids are thrust back forth. Fuck. The figure focuses in on Eddie, whom it turns out had stolen the 3 white stones that he had pulled out. I am running out of breath. Why am I running out of breath? Soon after, we find out from the tour guide, from a different tour group, that since they're still in the tower, they agreed to take up the last name Morgan after Morgred agrees to become their surrogate parent. Soon after, we find out which... I skipped a line, damn it. The two use the stones. Sorry if that's getting old for some of you, but I just think it's fun to say... I mean, go ahead, give it a shot yourself. I'll give you about 5 seconds to try it. See what I mean? No? Well, fine. I think it's fun to say anyways. I don't know about you all, but that just doesn't sit right with me. But what do I know? I don't write this stuff. I just review it. That was like a demented Woody Woodpecker.